Hello people of the internet, this is the special report, your news and views program about geek gaming culture on the internet. Coming up in the show today, two men are fined an enormous amount of money by violating the UK's Gambling Act after their website allowed people to give away their in-game currency of FIFA 17 to bet on real-world soccer games. A lot to talk about with this. My name is Shady Shadow and the special report will start right about now. Remember the whole mess that was the CSGO Lotto scandal? There was a lot of details that went into that. Basically what it was is that a couple people ran this website in which you could gamble off your weapon skins that you got from the loot crates, which the only way that you could get a key for those loot crates in the Counter-Strike Go game is to buy them off of Steam for real-world currency, and then you could also sell those skins for real-world currency. Only thing is, those skins could go for an exorbitant amount of money. These guys ran a website in which they could essentially have people gamble on more skins, risking their own skins in the process, via sort of an office pool type of thing, and then they can then either sell those off for Steam currency or World War currency or whatever it was, or they could gamble those off and try to make their fortunes more so, or they could get more skins and then more skins. The problem with this is that they advertise in such a way that was unethical. They advertise it as if they were not the owners of the site, which they were clearly were. Well, it's kind of happened again, only this time it is kind of unclear as to what exactly constituted this, because we're not sure how they were able to pull this off. And I'll get into more detail about why I believe that here in a minute. But basically, according to the BBC, Craig Douglas, who was known on YouTube as NepentheZ, I hope I get that name right, and his business partner, Dylan Rigby, ran a website in which you could trade in your in-game currency of FIFA 17 for what are called credit chips. Now, what you did with those is, once you traded those in, you were then able to bet on real-world soccer games, or what the English call football. The reason I say that is because the website in question went by the name of Foot Galaxy. Now, the UK's Gambling Act has a rule in it saying that you can't do this. You cannot run an unlicensed gambling community, according to them, connected to a video game. They just don't allow you to do that. If you are licensed, I believe, then yeah, you can do it, but they were not allowed to do it. They were breaking the law just by running the site. These two men eventually pled guilty and now have been fined, Douglas paying £91,000 or $112,000 or the regional equivalent, and Rigby is being fined £164,000 in fines and costs. Douglas's YouTube channel got 1.3 million subscribers, which he advertised this site on. Now, I did not watch these videos. I did not know whether or not that he was trying to pose as just an ordinary user, or if he disclosed himself as the owner of the site. I don't really know, and if that was the case, in which he did disclose that whole information, that becomes much more problematic. However, right at the moment, I don't think that he did try to conceal that information. But then again, I don't know the whole basis around what his videos were like, so I don't know one way or the other. It is the first time, according to BBC, the UK's Gambling Commission has prosecuted people for running an unlicensed gambling website connected to a video game. Again, you just don't do that. Chief Executive Sarah Harrison said, quote, "This is one of the most serious cases that has ever been investigated and prosecuted by the Commission. Its gravity," she continued, "is reflected in the significant financial penalties imposed by the judge. The case demonstrates that we will use the full range of our statutory powers to investigate and prosecute individuals and companies who try to operate illegally." Now, these winnings could be transferred back to the FIFA 17 video game, according to them, and then used as virtual currency in the game after you go bet them off and you win, or maybe you lose and you have to go get more, or whatever. Now, Douglas admitted to a charge of being an officer of a firm that provided facilities for gambling without an operating license. Any further offense relating to the advertising on unlawful gambling. Rigby, who is 33 years old from Colchester, Essex, I hope I'm announcing that name correctly. I'm not very good at pronunciations, guys. Pleaded guilty to 2 charges connected to the provision of facilities for gambling and a third offense linked to advertising illegal gambling. Okay, so before we go into the details of how they did this or lack thereof, let's talk about what this whole thing and what CSGO Lotto was mostly concerned with outside the whole fact of, is this ethical? Did they advertise this in an ethical way? And I'm with majority of people who say, okay, as long as it's done in a legal sense, if you want to gamble anything, then go right ahead and do it. As long as you do it in a legal sense, if you're doing it in legal grounds. In this case, obviously they weren't licensed, so obviously they weren't allowed to do that. You just go do it. But the most problematic thing here is that there is no way to determine what age you are when you go to use these sites. So a minor or somebody who is not of age to be allowed to gamble in a legal sense can go and use these sites, and there's no age check to determine whether or not you are of age to be able to gamble, period. I mean, if you're 17 years of age in the United States, you're not allowed to gamble. It's just that simple. You're just not allowed to even go into a facility with that. Sometimes it's 21 years of age. You just are not allowed to go in there. You're not allowed to be on the premises if you're not of age on a casino. You just don't do that. You just don't have the legal grounds to be there. So yeah, that is a big problem, and that is something that a lot of these places are trying to curb. There's a lot of laws that are trying to curb that underage gambling. And not only is there no age check, but there is no evidence to suspect that they were even considering or even interested in checking age or are trying to advertise this thing to minors. They are trying to advertise this thing to people who were not of age to gamble to begin with, who had no business gambling off anything. And that is what got CSGO Lotto into a bunch of trouble outside of the fact that it was unethical. This, I'm not sure about the ethical aspect of it, again, because I'm not quite sure if they were actually disclosing themselves as the owners, and I'm not quite sure if this is going to help or hurt NepentheZ in the long run. I mean, he does have a YouTube channel that is 1.4 million subscribers large, and it doesn't look like he's really hurting in a way of money, so I'm pretty sure that he's not going to be hurting to pay the fine, and he seems to be kind of unaffected by the whole thing. Now, he did post a bit of a update about what happened in one of his videos, and that's the video that you're seeing in the background here. He did say that the offending period was from November of 2015 to, I believe, either January or February of 2016. That would be before the whole issue around CSGO Lotto went down, and this was for a full year. He was advised by his attorneys to not go into detail about how he felt about it, the judgment in of itself, and even though he pled guilty to the running a gambling business without a license and the whole license issues, he pled not guilty to knowing and allowing minors to gamble on this website. I'm not sure about whether or not he should go ahead and say his feelings about it. I mean, everybody kind of does it. I mean, the case is over now. I'm not sure if they can even go back and say anything or to change their ruling. If he does say anything, I mean, it's done now. I mean, he's pled guilty. There's really nothing else he can do to change that whole fortune at this point. And that, again, puts the whole case before the whole CSGO Lotto thing went about, and everybody's attention went on to this whole situation. And that time frame of it being a case that went on for a full year puts into perspective something that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes as to how in the hell they were able to get into the system in order to pull such a gambling site off in the first place. Really tells you a whole hell of a lot when we get into that discussion. But as far as I'm aware, this seems to be, even though he was told by his attorneys not to say anything about his feelings, this seems to be the right way to go, to just say, hey, I'm sorry, I made some mistakes, I was naive, as he put it, and to just move on with life. I feel like that maybe he just wants to get this behind him and to just move on from it. He's got a whole channel of 1,400,000 subscribers to run. This is a pretty big channel, so I guess if he's going to take a nosedive from this, I guess it's gonna happen by now. But the BBC website said that he had a 1.3 million subscribers. It's grown since then. So I'm guessing he's not hurting on a moral front, or people are not going to hold him accountable forever for it. They're going to say, hey, it's a mistake, let's move on from it, or hey, they did you wrong, or whatever the case may be. So on that front, I think he's probably going to do okay. I guess people are going to forgive him, or maybe say that the courts were wrong, or to slam on him hard, or something like that. I'm not quite sure what the end result will be on the court of public opinion, but from the looks of things, I'm guessing he is going to be exonerated in the court of public opinion and just move on with life. And sometimes that's the best way to go about it. Any time in which we have this huge problem where we just hold an albatross over somebody's head, even to make the smallest error, and we just hold it over them forever and ever and ever, and we just have these knee-jerk reactions in which we just ostracize everybody for their lives if they make even the slightest error. And I think that's something that we need to fix in our society, and I think this might be a time in which we can show that, hey, we can be forgiving, we can be forthcoming and say, hey, you made a mistake, we acknowledge that you made a mistake, you own up to it, we forgive you, and we're ready to move on, and no harm, no done from it. You learned your lesson, and hey, we think you're a better person, and you're a better respectful person because of it, because you made that error, and because you made it into a teachable moment, and because, hey, you owned up to it. You're a bigger man, you're a better person because of that. We're not going to suddenly put you on a massive Twitter block list. We're not going to suddenly unfollow you. We're not going to suddenly ostracize you from your life. We're not going to blacklist you for it. As long as you know that you did wrong and you own up to your mistakes. We have a huge problem in society right now in which we look as ostracizing people as the first response instead of the last resort. And this might be a sign that we might be on the road to fixing this in a small way. It has to get much bigger in that sense, but at the very least, we're kind of learning that one mistake does not need to be the end of somebody's career or anything like that. It doesn't have to end a person's life. We don't need to ruin somebody's life outside of an error we see someone make. The fact that after he published that video, the subscriber base grown since then is proof that perhaps we still have that within our ability to forgive some people. I mean, everybody deserves a second chance, and I think we've forgotten that in our society within the past few years. I mean, there's times in which we think somebody made a mistake, and we end up us making a mistake in how we thought about what they did. And maybe it's us that making a mistake in reacting too early before we understand everything that is going on. We believe the wrong persons. So yeah, this is a step in the right direction. I mean, there's a lot of ways to go before we're able to say we've completely fixed that problem, and it's a problem that is in need of a huge amount of fixing, but I think this is a step in the right direction. Now, as far as the gambling itself is concerned, how is this possible? How is one particular site or a group of sites able to go into the API of a game like this and able to do this in the first place? That's where I'm concerned about. That's where I'm confused about. How in the world can a closed source API able to be tethered like this to make it able to have this sort of thing happen, to have where you can gamble away your virtual currency? There's no way to get it through real world money. The only way you're able to get it, as far as I'm aware, and I'm not the biggest FIFA expert on this one, maybe there is a way, is to win it through challenges in the game. There's no way to fast track it through real world currency. There's no macro transactions in this regard. There's no way in order to microtransaction this, as far as I'm aware. So how are these people able to get into that system to be able to run these sites? How are people able to transfer their credits to game to site and back to game? I think that's a real issue here, is how are they able to do this in the first place? Is EA giving them that ability? Because if they're not, they're really not doing anything to stop them from doing this. This might be something that is well known by this point, and if it's really publicized at the point where the courts are taking a look at this, then there's got to be something that EA is getting aware of to say, hey, this is a problem here. They're getting to something they should not even have access to begin with. We might want to do something about this, but it is getting attention to the game. More people are buying this game, but there's this whole idea of, if they can get into this, what else can they get into? Can they get into maybe my Steam account, or maybe my PS4 account, or maybe my Xbox Live account, and do more damage with it with just like tethering it for the sake of these gambling sites? Is there something else I need to be concerned about? And this is where the majority of the problem comes into play. What else are they going to be able able to do, in which neither EA or whatever console manufacturer or digital distribution vendor is going to take issue with or take action about. If this was able to go on for such a long time to where somebody is going to take notice of, and I'm not quite sure how long it took for the courts in the UK in order to say, hey, wait a minute, you can't do that, before they actually went and did just that. What does that say about the security of this particular game? If there's really no way for a person to legally get that source code to be able to pull this off, or be able to tether into the API of EA's website or maybe PlayStation Network or whatever, I'm confused as to where they were able to do this, how they were able to even pull this up to be able to have such a website to begin with, let alone run it in the way they were running it. Should I be concerned? Is it something that needs to be addressed? In my mind, maybe it's something that they need to take a closer look at. Maybe it's something that they should say, hey, this needs to be nipped in the bud before it gets out of hand here, before we see a much bigger problem with either these sites getting out of hand or getting too popular, or somebody wanting to do real damage here. But the problem is that we don't know whether or not it's something that is legal, whether or not it's something that can be done, because we don't know what exactly they did in order to be able to transfer virtual currency that you can't get through real world means. You can only get it through actions you take within the game from one place to another and then back again. That means that you're linking onto some sort of thing you probably shouldn't be linked onto unless EA gave them this. And maybe my words are going to be moot, because maybe somebody knows more than I do about how they got into this, and I'm more confused than anything, and I'm more concerned than anything. And if I'm wrong on this and there's some way you do it in a legal sense, then more power to them. They're free to do that, as long as it's legal, as long as you don't promote or encourage underage gambling and all of that, and you're ethical about it, which CSGO Lotto did none of that. And right now, the only crime that these guys did is that they ran an illegal gambling website without a license. That's really the only concern I had with that, and how the hell they got onto the API in the first place. I might be using the wrong terminology of API. And as far as EA is concerned, I don't know whether or not EA is ever going to do anything about this. It's something that I feel as though they may need to take a second look at, because even though this does bring attention to the game, and this might bring more eyeballs to the game, maybe more buyers of the game, I might be a little bit concerned, because if they are able to do this, imagine what else they were able to do, especially if your system does not allow for this kind of stuff to happen. And everything I'm saying, as I said before, might just be hot air, because again, I'm not the biggest FIFA player. I have only seen videos of it, so I'm not an expert in how this might be achievable in a legal sense. Maybe the website does something in which you're able to transfer credits from one place to another. Maybe it has that feature. But as far as I'm aware, there's really no way that you are able to do this. And I'm repeating myself at this point. I'm going in circles at this point. So the bottom line here is that I don't think this is as big of a scale as CSGO Lotto was, because there was a lot of problems that went with that site as far as ethics are concerned, and as far as them not stopping anything with underage gambling is concerned. The biggest part was the ethics there. And as far as I'm aware, NepentheZ did not try to conceal that he owned the site or whatever the case may be. I can't find any videos as to them advertising that anymore. That's probably because they were probably ordered to take them down. That's probably what it was. So there might be no evidence to say one way or the other whether or not they were being ethical in all this, which it might be a feather in their cap if that was the case, because at least they did something better than CSGO Lotto did. But underage gambling might be an issue, and maybe if they didn't get forced to take down the videos or the site, maybe they could become licensed. Maybe there's a way for them to say, hey, maybe you can bring us into a process so we can get that license. That might be an idea. Maybe say, hey, if we need a license, maybe we just didn't know we needed one in this case. Maybe there was something to it that we didn't see in the rules. Maybe we can go through the process of how to get that license. Because as far as I'm aware, the matter of not having a license was really the only thing they really did wrong outside of the underage gambling thing, which is a huge concern in and of itself. But then again, there was the whole idea of how the hell they got into the API, which is the bigger issue here. And I think EA is somebody's going to have to address that and tell us whether or not that is actually legal, if it's not already, and if it is, then make it clear cut that that's something you can do. I mean, we might have missed something that they said at E3 or the Nintendo Switch conference or something along those lines. Maybe we missed something there. I don't know, but you gotta make it clear so that's something you have to do. If that's something that's going to concern a whole lot of people, how the hell you got it into this system, then maybe you should address it, because what else could they possibly do? It's not gonna hurt Nepen in the long run, because quite frankly, I don't think it is hurting him. He's making a whole lot of money. He's got a good bit of sponsorships still. It's not really hurting him in that sense. So it's not something that he's going to be hurt by in the court of public opinion, but it's a setback nonetheless. And it raises some concerns about how the hell you were able to do this in the first place. That's going to do it for this edition of the special report. Thanks again, as always, for watching. Please forgive me for my voice. I do have a bit of a cold right at the moment, so I'm a bit nasally than I usually am. Please go hit the like button if you like this video, even if I don't know everything about FIFA 17, and please share this video and leave a comment down below about what you thought about what I said in the episode. Thanks again for watching. My name is JD Shadow, and as always, that just happened.